Hello, Aline. Hello.
Hello?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, sir. I
That's
can hear you
great.
very well. Can you hear me too?
Yeah. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Well, everything is kind of coming along pretty well.
Yeah. Well, that's good
Uh,
to know.
Great.
Um, Abiba is not here yet. Let me see.
Yeah, we can maybe wait for a couple of minutes.
Yes, okay. Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Good afternoon, Abiba. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm fine. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Series 9 of the Virtual Enrichment Seminar. I am Alun Sen, Associate Coordinator of the Fulbright Program in Sub-Saharan Africa, and today our speakers will be telling us about art and generational knowledge. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Mamadou Bodia and Abiba Odogba. Dr. Mamadou Bodia is a researcher at the Social Studies Lab at the Institut Fondamental d'Afrique Noire, IFAN, at Cheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar. He is a coordinator of the Fulbright Fellows in Sub-Saharan Africa at the West African Research Center in Dakar. He received his PhD from the University of Florida and is a founding Sahel Research Group member. Habiba is a multidisciplinary artist who graduated with a bachelor's in comparative literature and society from Columbia University in May 2023. She also concentrated in African American and African diaspora studies with an emphasis on Black Francophone population, indigeneity, health, and education. In 2022, Habiba researched natural hair discrimination in Paris in a dissertation called La discrimination capillaire, detangling the roots of Black hair in France. She shared her own experience in the three-piece sculptural work published in the Solomon Guggenheim Museum Summer College Workshop ebook. Her photo fashion project entitled Hair, Extensions of Myself reimagines her hairstyles as garments to celebrate Black hair's versatility, playfulness, and resilience. Once again, welcome Abiba and Dr. Boudia. Abiba, the floor is yours. Whenever you're ready, you can share your presentation on Zoom.
Okay, I'll share it now. Thank you for the introduction. Sorry. Okay, can everyone see the presentation?
I can see it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. 1 second. Is it loud? Can you hear me? Or is there background noise? Sorry.
I can hear you very well.
Okay, it's fine. 1 second. Sorry, 1 second. One second.
That's fine.
See, I'm trying to make it full screen. Well, it looks like it's just gonna have to be like that. That's fine. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Anyway. Okay, so thank you again for the introduction. My name's Habiba, and today I'm going to talk about art and generational knowledge. So this is a timeline of how I'm going to present things. And oopsies. Okay, so first I'm just going to start off with an introduction about myself. Then I'll talk about art and what it means to me. And then I'll explain generational knowledge. And at the end, hopefully, everything will come together and you all will be able to understand why it's important based on why I think it's important. So to introduce myself again, I'm the Fulbright US student researcher in Abuja, Nigeria. And here I'm studying the Ibira weaving tradition. So for centuries, Ibira people of Nigeria have woven rich cultural histories together in the creation of textiles. These cloths, in addition to practical utilities, historically have spiritual significance, making them physical manifestations of healing practices. But today, extinction threatens this weaving tradition, as younger generations are less likely to learn the craft. So my project promises to keep the tradition alive by considering the mental health burden in Nigeria. This is because individuals can use cloth to express their emotions and uplift their community in an environment where issues like affordability, availability, and stigmatization often make mental health services inaccessible. In the future, I hope to create medical solutions using cloth, which is an item that is universal and at times culturally significant. These solutions can benefit populations with different cultural beliefs that conflict with institutional mental health. So for my project, I plan to produce a series of blankets that symbolically raise awareness for mental health issues. And I'm also having conversations with community members to understand their attitudes about mental health. What is art? So for me, I understand art through this idea of futurity. Futurity is something that I learned in my senior year of college, senior spring, in a class called Religion and the Afro-Native Experience. So you might see the background of this slide has ancestors know who we are. This is from an exhibit at the Smithsonian, and it's called Black Native Identity and Futurity. And this is when I first learned it. So I'll read this quote. Indigeneity, as conceived of within Western tropes, often has to contend with temporality laid upon it. You're here, you aren't here. By these invading forces, so futurity doesn't always seem to mesh easily within Western academic and gaming frames. This is from Jordan Clapper's book about indigenous futurity and indigenizing games. Basically, futurity considers our ancestors as involved in our present and futures as they are in our past. And so that's something that I try to carry with me whenever I'm making something. For the class that I had mentioned, Religion and the Afro-Native Experience, I actually made a quilted self-portrait. And for me, that was a healing process. I don't have a picture of it, but in it, there's squares, and each square is dyed in varying shades of red to play with the idea of blood quantum and one drop rule. And each square was supposed to represent an ancestor of mine. So when assembled, the quilt squares they form my image, just as my ancestors intertwined their lives with one another to eventually create me. And this is leaning more specifically into the idea of Black Native identity and futurity, because although some being my ancestors, possessed a higher quantity of Black or Native blood, they were bound to each other through community. And so after I read works like I've Been Here All the While by Alan E. Roberts and What Blood Won't Tell, A History of Race on Trial in America by Ariella Gross, and just the personal narratives of Black Native artists and their ancestral connection in art, I've realized that what hinders me and historically other Black folks in the US from identifying with our Native roots is the white settler colonial imposition that kinship follows blood ties. And moreover, it's the indoctrination of this belief as the qualification for tribal membership and Native status. So unfortunately, slavery has severed many African Americans from their ancestral roots. And while this too affects me, I'm grateful to know some stories, right, of my heritage from my mother's side, which she's told me. And in this project now that I'm doing in Nigeria, I'm able to pull things from my father's side because he's from here. So with everything that I do, basically, I'm drawing on the information I know, but I also look within myself to gather information from my lived experience. In this way, I hope that with my art, I can strengthen the connection between past and present and future realities, insisting that our ancestors are as involved in our life as those who we physically encounter day to day. This is an example of another art piece that I did where I was just trying to, again, combine or understand the past and the present. And this piece was about the African photographic archive and trying to reconcile it in the 19th and 20th century, specifically as both a controlling state apparatus, like the camera and photography, and a device for Africans to assert their agency on individual and collective scales. So in this project, I trace the historic migration of African people with the moving photographers and their moving clienteles across different cultural and cartographic boundaries. And then I explore the exchange of photographs from private to public spheres, as well as, you know, their conversations to different mediums like postcards. And then finally, I investigate the shifting meanings of photographs and more generally, their ability to not only represent relationships between the sitters and the photographers or the historical context, but actively alter and create relationships about these situations with every viewer's encounter in the present. So basically, I conclude my analysis with an explanation of my effort to move away from salvage sentiment and remake the fragmented African photographic archive through collage. And I chose collage because I had rested my rationale heavily upon Richard Volk's conception of an image object, which he derives from Alfred Gell's Art and Agency in 1998. That is, photographs are not only reflective of social context, but also generative of them. So I ground my thinking also and two other scholars' solution to confront the violence of archival practice and representation and avoid perpetuating it, right? Because image objects means that they can also generate what it is that they're representing by using multimodality, which is something that Saidiya Hartman first posed. That is, through abstracting realist formations of colonized individuals, photographic multimodal methods may generate new kinds of conversations, new relations and feelings, and ultimately healing. This is just two pictures of a piece that I did called Hair Extensions of Myself. And again, it was a healing process for me because I was, you know, we had mentioned this in the introduction, but I was just interpreting my own experience and thinking about my own past, my own present, and where I want to be in the future. And so I had reimagined the hairstyles I had when I was younger as garments now. And I did that because for me, they're also representative of protection. And the one on the left you'll see is a veil, which at the same time makes me feel or made me feel like anonymous. And that can offer a sort of protection at times, but at other times it can make me feel invisible or unseen. And so again, I guess like in this way, it wasn't a collage, but there was a collage of different feelings that I had, and I was trying to put it all together. And then in this one, more clearly, I was trying to focus on like the protective element of the styles. So I did this when I was in Paris after talking to different people there, Black people from like just African diaspora who were living there. And I was trying to make pieces, again, just talking to them about their experience with their hair and then making it into a garment, something they can wear, because I am really interested in, like I have been saying, healing. And I understand that, you know, I don't have a background in science, so I can't make something yet. I can't make something yet that someone can wear that will heal them physically, if let's say they have a wound. But I'm still just hoping, like through my work, that I can, I guess, create some type of emotional healing, or I don't know, like ancestral healing. There's people just figuring out and reconciling like with their past, especially when those people have been colonized subjects. So what is generational knowledge? This is a book called Arts in a Changing America. And again, I'm really relying heavily on futurity. So through futurity, then generational knowledge is indigenous resilience, it's a site of memory, it's connection, and it's self-knowledge. So for me, I had mentioned this in my article that I wrote for this presentation, but I really was understanding that me learning this craft, the weaving tradition, was more than just me performing the act, but it was a relationship or a connection between generations and a glimpse into the future of our community. So it is cloth weaving for Ibira people in Nigeria. It is a historical art practice, and it is also a social one, right? As parents pass down the skill to their children. But this type of information sharing is generational knowledge, because it does connect me with people from my past, and I'm trying to use that to affect people in the future. So although I had believed that only elders bore the responsibility to teach and youth the responsibility to learn, I now see that generational knowledge is not always linear, if ever, but instead it's a circular process. This is why it matters, because artists can engage with ancestral connections and nonlinear time, right, in order to cultivate radical futures. So that's what I'm trying to do with my work. And that's why generational knowledge matters, because if ever linear, which I really don't think it is a circular process, and it does reveal and remedy the conditions of a community through intergenerational connections, cultural preservation, and sustainability. And so weaving and other art traditions exist as generational knowledge. And by continuing the practice of these crafts, communities can understand the realities of their members and mend the tears between generations and protect their futures. Thank you.
Thank you, Abiba, for this wonderful presentation.
Thank
I'll
you.
now leave the floor to Dr. Bodian for the feedback, and after that, we'll open up for questions or comments.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Abiba. And I think this presentation has been an eye-opening for me, but also the way you connected this your own experience with this generational knowledge is kind of fascinating. But I also like the all these dimensions that you brought. I don't know if I will contribute. I would love to let the floor to our colleagues and participants. And then I will make a comment later on by connecting maybe this experience with maybe something I can draw from the Senegalese experience in terms of the relationship between it's kind of generational knowledge. If Aliu, if I don't know if if you can proceed, process this way, or do you want me to elaborate more on my personal take in relationship to the topic?
Yeah, maybe if you could do that, and then afterwards, we can open the floor to the audience, if they have questions or comments.
Okay. So I will comment on what Habiba said, but I also want to give an insight into my understanding of the topic, but trying to draw from the Senegalese experience. And I want to discuss what I will label as an intergenerational memory, political imagination, and resistance through arts. Unfortunately, I didn't make a kind of a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm gonna give an oral presentation. And as some of you know, Senegal arts and politics are not separate spheres. They are a mutually constitutive force that have shaped the country's political history, but also cultural vitality. And this has been going on since the colonial period, the pre-colonial period, where griots, traditions, but also post-colonial cultural nationalism, which also included a dimension of protest musics in the early 1980s to contemporary digital satire. And through this process, of course, art has functioned both as an archive of memory, but also a battleground of idea. Artistic practices are not only transmitted across generation, but are also interpreted by each generation in response to shifting political and social reality. So what I'm going to do here is to explore how intergenerational artistic knowledge in Senegal contribute to political consciousness, civic engagement, and resistance. But let me just make a quick overview by talking about the historical foundations and showing how art is a political memory and how it played a very important role in statecraft in Senegal. Griots or Gewel in Senegal, for example, have long been central figures in Senegalese political culture. In post-colonial area, for example, they serve as the court of kings, such as Lat Dior Ngoné Latyr, the Damel of the Kayor, but also you have other empires where griots have played a very important role when it's come to preserving dynastic lineage and legitimizing power through narrative. Their mastery of praise and poetry, genealogy, but also music make them indispensable advisor and social commentators. But even today, right, they also played a very important role because we know some of them, Ablaye Mbaye or Samba Jabare Sam, who passed away a few years ago. And these are emblematic of this enduring role of griots in Senegal, in the Senegalese society. With independence, of course, Léopold Sédar Senghor, who is a great poet, but also a philosopher, have kind of institutionalized art as a pillar of national identity. So he created a school, L'École de Dakar, which is the Dakar School, and promoted a cultural policy that blended African aesthetic with European modernism, guided by the ideal of negritude. And we do have many artists like Papa Ibra Tal or Ibra Ndiaye or Suleiman Keita. who were supported by the state commissions, participated in the creation of iconic works displayed in museum. Senghor's vision of art was not only aesthetic but political. It was about shaping a post-colonial modernity rooted in African humanism. So during the single-party regime, you know, from 1960 to 2000, public arts also was also used for soft propaganda. Major public works like a mural and at some places like La Place de l'Indépendance or other artistic motifs in state building. And all these are kind of celebrations of Senegalese national identity and a sort of cultural pride. We did have also a couple of national festivals, such as one of them, you know, being well known at that time, the Festival Mondial des Arts Nègres in 1960, which were deployed as a platform for promoting Senegalese cultural diplomacy. And of course, the second aspect that I want to emphasize is intergenerational knowledge, but also political socialization through arts. Some of you may have heard about Yanamar, and I'll talk about it later. But what I want to mention here is that artistic knowledge in Senegal is often transmitted through family-based lineage. In the town of Joal Fadiout, for example, or villages in Casamance, we can see, for example, how wood sculptures or drummers or fabric dryers teach their children not just technique, but also symbolic and spiritual meaning. I come from Senegal and in southern Casamance, where we have this kind of how this kind of knowledge is transmitted through family. And I think it's kind of similar among the Serer, where learning to, you know, carve a tan, for example, which is a sacred object, is inseparate from learning cosmological belief or ethics of community, but also ritual codes. In urban centers like Dakar, artistic collective you know, it play a key role in political socialization. The Yanamar movement, which is the kind of a protest movement born in 2000 and in 2011 as a result of a challenge to you know, when Abdoulaye Wade, one of the Senegalese presidents, wanted to change the constitution in order to run for a third term. So this opened the door to a protest led mainly by rappers, such as Fou Malade or Kurgi, which is a hip hop movement, and they emerge as the main opponent of the regime, and which, as I mentioned, attempted to amend the constitution for a third term. So, and their music, such as, for example, Faut pas forcer, you know, don't force, became viral as a result of this protest. And they combine rap with grassroots activism, door-to-door campaign, and civic education workshop. And this has effectively, you know, fused artistic performance with intergenerational political pedagogy. So, and I think we also have other artistic expressions, but I think the hip hop movement have been instrumental when it's come to shaping the political dynamics from 2000 to now. But I will just conclude on another expression of this kind of art and in relation to resistance. It's what I call satire and civic engagement, and these have emerged in recent years. We've seen, for example, street art. The way it become a prominent mode of political commentary, particularly in urban areas. And we've seen artists like Doctor, who is a graffiti pioneer, and other artists, graphics, Galsen, and they have transformed Dakar wall into a mural, and in walls depict image. If you go, for example, La VDN, for those who know Senegal, you can see how images like Thomas Sankara or Cheikh Anta Diop or other martyrs of 2021 protest today. And these visuals serve as alternative curricula for youth narrative. And this kind of narrative that is omitted by textbook. And so this is something that have been growing over the last few years, and I think it deserves some kind of attention in terms of how the political shift is also creating a shift in how people imagine political engagement, with art being a political force across generations. So to conclude in a few words, and I think this transmission of artistic knowledge is not a confined to the preservation of aesthetic forms. It is a political act, and through oral performance to visual narrative, fashion design, or digital satire. And I think artists across generation continue to shape civic imagination, question authority, and offer alternative futures. From the drumbeat of the griot to click on a smartphone recording protest gravity. Art remains a vital space where memory, resistance, and creativity converge. So this is a perspective that I wanted to share. Aliwa, I will stop there, and maybe we can open the door to discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Bodian. Abiba, how do you feel that Dr. Bodian's contribution relates to your vision of art in Nigeria? Do you see similarities?
I do see a similarity. I think that so with my own work, I'm not necessarily like saying anything political, but again, it's just like the experience and the conditions that do make what I'm doing something that is political, especially considering that a lot of people here now don't pick up this craft, and they're not doing it because they don't think that there's any money in it. So that is a representation of what's happening in the economy. And again, now it's a political, there's other reasons that are impacting, other factors in people's lived experiences that are impacting and influencing the way that people want to engage with art and their traditions, their crafts traditions.
Yeah, thank you, Abiba. Dr. Badian, do you wanna add something to that before we open the floor for the questions?
Well, I think we can open the door to the questions and contributions.
Okay. Anybody would like to ask Dr. Bodian or Abiba a question, or would like to contribute to the presentation?
I could try to. So, sorry, this is Heinz. I'm in Accra, Ghana. And unfortunately, I missed the first parts of Dr. Bodian's response because our power went off and now it's come back on, so I can join you again. But I did get the chance to hear the complete presentation of Habiba's, which I really enjoyed. Thank you very much. So the question that I'm really pondering is that which Habiba kind of referred to now is that relationship between the daily lived experience of people here in West Africa, and particularly under the current economic conditions, and that relationship to art. Is there things about how people are expressing themselves through their clothing, through their hairstyles, through their ways of living and participating that you would see as related to the artistic expression that you discussed?
So I'm assuming you wanted me to respond. I think yes, there are ways of people living, especially when it comes to dress, like how they're dressing themselves, that do reflect the like their understanding of artistic expression, I think you were saying today. And I think the thing that's, I guess, like interesting is that, so a lot of people, right, they'll still wear these fabrics if there's a wedding or there's some sort of like whatever ceremony, they'll wear it then, but that's kind of like the extent of their engagement with it. So it kind of reminds me a lot about okay, I'm not an expert with like economy, but it does kind of remind me of Karl Marx. I think it was him talking about commodity fetishism. So basically like people, or like the mystique of a commodity. A lot of people, they don't understand what it is, like the histories right behind what they're doing or who even makes it. And that is something that I've seen very real here, where people will be wearing textiles, right, that have a rich tradition and history, but they don't even know. And that was surprising to me because it's like, how do you not know it if it's right here? And I had somebody who was even like, oh, I didn't know like that's how you made it, or this is my first time ever learning about this like crafts tradition. But then at the same time, I was confused because there's like such a strong aesthetic with the way that people dress themselves here. And a lot of it is like they wear the, you know, the what, like wax fabrics, like the Ankara. And they also have a lot of dyed clothing. So that's another crafts tradition, adire. And so you see it everywhere. And so just because you're seeing it everywhere, or I'm seeing it everywhere, I just kind of assume that people know where it's coming from. And I don't know exactly, it's kind of funny because it's like, okay, it's weird that I'm kind of imposing that on them. Like they should know the history behind it if it's something that's being made here. When honestly, like even in the US, right, I don't know the history behind like probably 90% of the things that I'm wearing. And there is a history there just because it's not, you know, in your face, like, oh, this is like artistic. That doesn't mean that there's not still some sort of like history behind it. So that's the way that I've experienced it. So another thing too is like, especially with this tradition with the weaving one, again, connecting it to the economy, is that it's kind of taken shape, like it's changed, where instead of using natural fibers or local hand spun yarn, they will just like get yarn, you know, imported from China. And also that's another issue too, because there's sort of like this competition happening between here and there and these fabrics, because now, you know, in China, they're able to replicate what's going on here. And because it's able to like be produced faster. That is something that's now making people like prefer to just get stuff from there. And it's still really odd to me because it's like, okay, it's indigenous here, but now it's going somewhere else so that it can be like sold back here. So there's a lot of layers to it. And I hope that that answers somewhat your question.
Thank you. That was really interesting, because, and particularly that last point you made, because I'm finding here in Accra, people are selling cloth on the street that's kente cloth, but in fact they'll say to you, here's kente cloth that's produced in Ghana, and here's kente cloth that's a printed version that comes from China, and it's much, much cheaper. And so for people to make a choice of what they'll wear, given the cost situation, it becomes really interesting. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Heinz, and thank you, Habiba. Anybody else?
Aline, Aline?
Yes.
Just a question to Habiba. I'm kind of curious about because I know that there is a, a kind of a transmission dimension with regard to the meaning of the objects. And I'm kind of curious because if you walk through, for example, any African market, so I would maybe refer to the Senegalese market. For example, Sandaga in Dakar or other markets or Lumas. You will find, for example, this profusion of textile or ornaments and other objects, like Fulani earrings, which now are kind of becoming part of not our daily life, but when it's come to wedding or when there is a special ceremony, people will just refer to these objects or wear them as a way of expressing their cultural belonging. But we can also see how more and more, for example, during Mardi Gras, it's kind of, I don't know how we call it it's a Christian holiday. Some kids, some parents will just use those objects or put make their children wear all these clothes that refer to some kind of tradition, but also arts. But they may not necessarily know the meaning. I'm kind of wondering if those kind of practices, kind of using traditional artifacts or objects as a sort of representation of a particular moment of people's life, marriage or wedding. The meaning can change, but the way people use that object also can be provided a new meaning. I don't know if in your experience you've seen something like that, where an object that have a particular meaning in the past is used in a way that attributed to another meaning, which also speaks to people from another generation. I'm here kind of thinking about the transmission, because this idea of that the chain of transmission have been broken, and sometimes people can use object without necessarily knowing a meaning, their initial meaning, but giving them a different meaning that also speak to them.
Yes, I definitely think that's true. And I was trying to think if there was like a very specific example I could draw from, because I do agree with you. And nothing, unfortunately, specifically is coming to my mind. Let me think. Gosh, I'm not exactly sure, but I guess sometimes what I see like people, so with certain fabrics, it's like maybe they'll use the fabric to clean something up, which probably sounds bad. Not this fabric in particular, not the one that I'm weaving, but just like the wax fabrics, like using it to clean up things, or when I'm weaving, I use it to drape over my loom so that it doesn't mess up my work. Yeah. And okay, this is more personal, but just like my experience here, right? So the way that I dress or I style the clothing here is a lot different from what most people wear. And so they're always kind of like, oh, like, I don't know, I guess like they didn't know that they could wear something like this, or they're curious, like, oh, well, how did you do that? So those are the only real examples I can come up with now. But from a larger, broader perspective, I definitely think that that's true, and that that's how things evolve and people find, relevance. I think that's actually a very necessary component to have, so that people can use these objects, right? In the future, they need to find ways to make it relevant again in their present life, which is what I'm trying to do with this cloth right now.
Hmm.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples? Like, does anything come to your mind specifically?
Yeah, because I'm kind of recently we hosted a couple of scholars who came to Senegal, um, uh, coming from the US, and one of them is very passionate about um, craft, jewelry, but also some kind of uh, object that, especially when it's come to uh, um, clothes and everything related to wearing these kind of arts objects. And he bought a couple of them. And as a Senegalese, a typical Senegalese, it can be awkward because he was kind of putting them on, and I remember the next day, it was beautiful, right? But as a typical Senegalese, it doesn't have it's not necessary. It's kind of there is a gender component, right? But it is beautiful for him, but the meaning is different. And I think for him, it's the connection with Africa. But for a typical African, it's something else, or it's associated with a particular gender. This is an example, right? But this is a sort of explanation across space, right? Someone who is not a native to a particular place may associate some kind of meaning to object he's experiencing with, without necessarily knowing the meaning or the connection, but it speaks to him in a certain way because that's how he defined his connection with Senegal, for example. I don't know if it makes sense.
No, it makes exact sense. And it's kind of a parallel, I think, also too. Like when somebody, cultural appreciation versus cultural appropriation, I think it's kind of similar to that. Not saying that it's an example of that, but it's the same thing where it's like, okay, like when is somebody engaging with this cultural piece? Like when is it showing appreciation and when is it not showing appreciation? Is it the way that you wear it that shows appreciation? Is it the authenticity of the thing that you're wearing that shows appreciation? So it's hard to like know where that line exists. And it does shift also based on the person, right, that's wearing it. So like for me, I feel like somebody, right, who has a connection here, maybe I'm not wearing a certain fabric in the way that it's supposed to be worn, but it wouldn't necessarily be, or people maybe wouldn't think of it as cultural appropriation in a way because of my connection. But again, at the same time, it could still be perceived as, why are you wearing it like that? And another thing too that's happened to me here is it's like I wear a scarf on my head, a headscarf. And a lot of people get confused by me wearing it like this and the way that I wear it. But in the US, you know, there's a lot of Black women who wear it, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're Muslim. My name also like is definitely affecting people's perception of that, but that's just another example too of like the context affecting and changing the ways that people see an object, like if it's that person and they're viewing someone wearing, you know, that fabric or whatever in a different way. But then also the meaning is different again for the person who's wearing it, like you were saying, where that person felt connected to Senegal. But also, I kind of think it's beautiful. Like there are some, what is it, kaftans that people wear here. And I'm like, dang, like I kind of want to get one tailored for me and wear it, but not wear it while I'm here because I know people would look at me like I've lost my mind. So like save it for when I go back to the US and rock it there.
Interesting.
Any last contribution? Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. Thank you, Dr. Bodian, and of course, a special thanks to Abiba. So, I would like to announce that we have a second seminar this month on Friday, May 16th with Dr. Amber Murray, and it's gonna be on politics of knowledge and the roles of social scientists. So stay tuned, and as we will be sending more information on that in the following days. So wishing you all a wonderful weekend and take care. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to
Thank you.
Abiba.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody. Thanks.
Mr. Boyan,
Lynn.
Thank you.
Nako. Thank you, Brandon. Bye-bye, Gaiden. bon fi mu ne am na ku des mais garaawul
waaw mais enregistrement bi mën nga ko je pense que
waaw waaw
ok allez sinon tu vas bien
Euh, oui, oui, alhamdulillah.